Thank you so much. Yes, I like all the hard topics. Let's not only do prescribed fire, let's talk about climate change and carbon markets. So I'm a glutton for punishment when it comes to complex issues that don't have straightforward answers and require a steep learning curve on the side of landowners. I do have interdisciplinary training. I actually have worked for federal agencies, private industry, degrees in fisheries biology, but I really found my home in the social science world, thinking about people and also thinking about the best way to communicate and work with adults in terms of managing their forests. So so today I'm going to have a kind of a conversation with you. I'm going to go over some of the research that we've presented in the past, but expand on it a little bit and sort of kind of wrap our heads around what is this private lands burning going to look like? What is it going to take to achieve anything in this space? So let me see if I can. There we go. Okay, so a little bit of an overview of the talk. I'm going to talk a little bit about what kind of fire are we talking about. There's a huge history that we need to understand in order to understand where we're going to go. A little bit about landowner decision-making and fire, some of the research on that. Just a short discussion about the cost of burning on private lands. This is always going to be a barrier. It's something that we need to be always thinking about. And then ideas for landowner education and training. Part of my research and extension program also focuses on methodologies to work with adult and to use in adult education. So I'll present a couple of those things too. So what kind of fire are we talking about? There's two kinds of fire. There's prescribed fire, which we are all familiar with because we use that term all day in and out. But there's also this concept called cultural burning. And I'm going to start with that because that's the practice that's been used for thousands of years in the United States and in this region. It is a term specifically associated with the burning done in indigenous communities. It's a social activity. It looks like different size burns that happen across different seasons. It can happen at different return intervals. And the goal is really to help provide goods and services that have cultural significance. And it's a way that people are connected to the land. So it's we talk about local ecological knowledge. We talk about cultivating a land ethic through those relationships. And so this is how forests have been managed for thousands of years. Now in Pennsylvania ever since 2009, so 15 years, we have prescribed fire. So what does that look like? It's a little different. It's controlled application of fire because we do live in a much more wildland urban interface. There's a lot of people around. We like to have a team of experts because the burns are so much more complicated because we're dealing with a completely modified ecosystem, invasive species, et cetera. There's weather conditions and seasons have a lot to do with what we can do. Typically, when it's done, it's usually thought of prescribed fires done at the large scale. This is sort of like conventional kind of federal level thinking. There's liability laws associated with it. There's often other kinds of forest management practices. And the goal is to restore healthy ecosystems. In most of the US, it's also about reducing wildfire hazard. And there's a top-down oversight. Really, really different from cultural burning. So the question is, what does the future of fire look like on private lands? We have these two ways of thinking about fire, and now we're in the beginnings of rediscovering what it means to have private lands burning. So here's some quotes from landowners that I've observed over the years, and there I have down there a citation for a paper where you can find this stuff. And when it comes to decision-making on private lands, landowners often talk about it's a balancing act between multiple objectives and also being socially responsible, being a good land steward, but also meeting their own personal goals. You've got to have skin in the game, meaning that it's about a shared effort and contribution. So cost share is something that is relevant to landowners because they understand that while they're getting private benefits from their land, there's also public goods. I'm a lifelong learner is also a phrase that's mentioned a lot because it's complicated to manage forests in this day and age. And it's something that we're having to constantly learn and readapt and think about. So these are all really positive things that that I understand from landowners that I think are conducive to sustainable land management. Here's a figure in this paper as well that's connecting how they allocate income. This is willingness to accept payment versus willingness to pay, and how they allocate their income based on the perspectives they have towards a particular stand, whether it's degraded or if it's in good condition, and how that helps inform their management actions, what kind of personal private benefits they may get, as well as other kinds of benefits for society. And this relates towards their values as far as like their land ethic and who they identify themselves as being. So this is a model that's moved out of economics towards understanding land ownership as a goal of personal achievement and understanding what is our potential as human beings. That's how we understand ourselves as human, is to get into natural areas and figure that stuff out. So landowners already have ideas about what their values and ethics are about land ownership and views about an appropriate course of action. And they're looking to secure these short-term benefits as well as long-term benefits of finding meaning or purpose. So what we do in extension and adult education is helping them understand what kind of actions are going to help them achieve those outcomes within the context of their values and views. And so it's really fitting in at this special place of helping them expand knowledge and their capabilities, so their skills and abilities to implement management plans, but also help them understand how to make it financially feasible, because you can have all kinds of goals, but if you can't afford to do it, it's not going to happen. So here's some of our research that I have going on. I have a couple of colleagues here in the room. Jesse Kreye is one, and he's the fire ecologist at Penn State for folks who may not know. And then we also have colleagues in California and other places. Arun Rajmi is my PhD student. He's graduated. He is now a postdoc, still at Penn State here. And we have a paper published in Forest Policy and Economics on our looking at landowner perspectives here in Pennsylvania. We have one coming out in fire ecology. That's a regional study that has spatial analysis components. And I'm going to show you some of those figures from that paper today. And we also have recently got funded to do research in California on these same topics. California has recently approved of liability protection, gross negligence liability protection that can be applied to private lands. They've invested funding into fire advisors, which is part of their extension system to help support burning on private lands. And the Joint Fire Science Program thought the work that we were doing here in the Mid-Atlantic region could be really valuable for helping inform and directing support for their private lands burning in California. So very exciting stuff coming up. But here in this region, most of the people that participate in our research we could classify as kind of gold star forest landowners. We did focus on forestry because it is kind of our field and discipline, but we understand that fire is can be applied beyond forests. Most of our study participants are male, so we can't say a lot about female landowners or their views. They're generally older in age. That's typical of a lot of landowners. Slightly better educated, a little bit wealthier than most of the average public. Respondents here, we have bias a little bit more towards larger landowners, over 100 acres. They're more likely to be involved in some sort of land ownership association or professional association. They're also more likely to have received some sort of assistance from a state or federal program, and also more likely to have used prescribed fire in this region. So there is a little bit of bias in terms of the data I'm getting ready to show you. So to understand their cultural values, we look at their management goals and their management activities, and their cultural values are focused on stewardship, family, and financial responsibility, and they are looking to focus on ecosystem management for multiple uses. And so when we think about, well, what about prescribed fire? What do they know about prescribed fire and what are their experiences? This heat map here is going to tell you kind of a distribution, so of where there's a concentration of certain ideas. So as far as when you look at like the blue areas and indicating level of knowledge, blue indicates very low. So, and then the red indicates high levels of knowledge. The yellow indicates where there's a mixture of ideas. So you can think about that there's more diversity of thought in the yellow zones as we move forward through these slides. So probably no surprise, knowledge about prescribed fire is relatively low up in the New York area and higher down in Southern Virginia, but there's a mixed opinions about, and this is self-reported knowledge, by the way. We didn't give them any exams or tests. We just asked them about what kinds of training or experience or where they got their information. As far as experience with prescribed fire, you can see in Pennsylvania, it's very blue, so very, very little experience. So there's an awareness of fire, but very, very little experience. So when we ask them their willingness to use fire as a management tool across the states, in Virginia, it's very high, and in New York, very low. Overall, 64% of landowners said that they would enroll in at least one prescribed fire program. And that you can see here that in Pennsylvania, it's sort of mixed again. I think in the northeastern part, there's still a little, there's less agreement as far as using prescribed fire. But in the southern part and western parts of Pennsylvania, there's more mixed opinions. There's an openness to thinking about using prescribed fire. And why is there this openness, even though they don't have a lot of experience? Well, we find that there is consistent trust in prescribed fire implementers. So that would be if you're, with the Game Commission or DCNR, that would be you guys. You are the experts, and you've demonstrated that this is a valuable tool. And so you can see once again in Pennsylvania that there is openness, a trust. There's mixed opinions, but overall the average says that there is a high level of trust. And risk perceptions are also mixed. So my interpretation of these figures is showing that Pennsylvania is at a state of transition where there is not a lumping of opinions in one direction or another, that there's a mixture, and within that diversity, there's opportunity for growth and learning. So the financial feasibility aspect of burning, we asked landowners, what would you be able to contribute? Because we know that burning is pretty expensive in this region, but what would you be able to contribute? And so half of respondents were willing to contribute at least $20 per acre per year, but 22% were willing to contribute up to $200 per acre per year. 36% of respondents offered $0. So that could indicate that they either didn't want to pay for fire or they didn't want to use fire. We gotta unpack that a little bit more. But on average, contributions for about 64% of respondents hovered around $68 per acre. When we predicted their choices to enter a program, the number one predictor was the cost of the program. The second predictor was how the program was designed, what kinds of features it had, which I'm going to get into in a minute. A third predictor was just the landowner characteristics, who they were as far as land ownership size, age, these kinds of things. And last was the expected benefit. So really, and this falls in line with the research that I did as a PhD student, that the process of how the program is created has a lot to do with participation and is not driven as much by the expected private benefits or ecosystem services. So connecting the dots, there is strong motivation to use fire to protect forest health and to control ticks and pests. And this is in line with values about land stewardship and family. People want a mix of financial support options. They want to reduce other management costs. They're hoping fire can do that, right? Hopefully. They want access to qualified consultants. So that is something that I know that this council is working on. And voluntary training for landowners and burns associations was also on the table. These are a variety of options that were all seen as being favorable at different levels. Mostly, though, the desire for qualified consultants and burn bosses was a priority. And this is a match with cultural values about financial stewardship, about making the best use of funding. So the landowners, the early adopters, are going to generally be those with less than 125 acres, younger, slightly wealthier, and enrolled in landowner assistance programs. So we know we can target these people if we want to start working with individuals. These are generally the landowners who are interested in fire. So what kind of fire are we talking about? We're talking about prescribed fire in one context. We're talking about cultural burning in another. So there's some overlap between the two. Where the question is who is going to be doing the burning, and then how can we provide liability protection on private land? So this is really the question that we have right now that's going to define what private lands burning looks like into the future. So the cost of burning in this region is really, really hard to unpackage. I'm trying to unpackage it. We don't have any research yet, but existing research shows that the size of the burn, labor, and escape guards are some of the highest costs in the eastern U.S. for prescribed burning. And as the question posed earlier, size does matter in this case. About 75% of private lands is less than 40 acres in size. So we're talking about small burn units, really. And the priority, according to this study by Butler, is on recreational benefits. So that would be hunting, that would be hiking. So we're looking at maybe using fire as food plot substitutes. We're looking at reducing hazards of recreating in the forest. And these are the types of benefits for the smaller, quote unquote, landowners under 40 acres. About 10% have over 100 acres. Well, actually, the remaining 20% have more than 100 acres. And these are the folks who are more likely to have a management plan, which might make them more familiar with the concept of a burn plan. They're also managing for wildlife more from an ecological perspective rather than like a private benefits perspective. And so when we think about working with different land sizes, we have to think about, the way the landowners are thinking about what they want to get out of their parcel. Labor, the cheapest burns around are the ones where they're burn associations and low complexity burns. In the Midwest, it's around $10 to $12 per acre. In the Southeast, it's around $25, $30 per acre. So we know that in those conditions that generally costs can be lower. Escape safeguards, yeah, this is going to be a challenge because with smaller parcels, you're going to come up against private property boundaries, so that's going to modify the size of the burn unit. If there's more burning going on, where are all these contingency plans going to come from? How many fire stations can really volunteer to serve in that capacity? So there's a lot of questions. So here's a little thoughts about landowner education and training that I want to share with you. That when we talk about adult learners, we're really talking about a very special category of learners that adults are self-motivated to solve practical management problems, and they want to achieve personal goals. So, they're like, I got a problem, what's the solution? They're not here to just learn about fire just because it's like a neat topic necessarily. They're going to integrate their past experience and past knowledge into that new learning experience, and their decisions are strongly influenced by peer opinions. I already know, as an expert, they're like, okay, nice ideas, Melissa, but, when their peers say something, that has the real impact. So we have to work within this context of how adults learn. I have a book called Strategies for Conducting Short-Term Impact Analysis for Environmental Education Programs. And in there, I talk about there are two major categories that an adult education program should really be thinking about. And that is that there's a difference between engagement and training people to take action. So when you're engaging landowners, you want to support their motivation to maybe, in this case, adopt prescribed fire, help them gain a vision or scope for like what can actually be done with fire, and help refine understanding. So there can be a lot of misconceptions associated with something new that they have very little experience with. And so during the engagement phase, usually experts are the ones talking, and they're discussing ideas and relationships to transform people's thinking and recommend proactive solutions. And this is one of the challenging spaces in extension education, is engaging people, because it's cognitively expensive. They have to sit back and listen. Most people, they're like, I want to take action now. So when you're training people to take action in the context of prescribed fire, we want them to be effective in their application of fire, be a smart manager. They need to be efficient as far as being a good steward of their finances, and of course, do it safely. And so when it comes to thinking about a program where we're training people to use fire, it's really helpful in adult education to choose topics about how the burn is conducted, using topics that come from the audience because they're interested in something like tick reduction. So conversations in that area would be an example. And the conversations need to fit current patterns of thinking, address personal losses or minimize those personal losses, and recommend easy solutions. So these are really two ways of thinking about adult education. I will point out that, not to put the cart before the horse, that engagement is really, really important that that is done before training people to take action, that it's really important that their motivation and their vision and their understanding are worked out in advance, because it's once they start applying fire, if it doesn't work out in the way they thought it was, or if it becomes more difficult or more expensive, they're less likely to continue using it because they haven't really fully understood the complexity of reintroducing fire in this landscape. And so engagement is really, really important. This is getting near to my last slide. This learning period is talking about the different ways that you can provide information, transfer information, and help improve understanding. So that would be the impact on their knowledge and understanding. On the top, you see like there's the typical ways you think about teaching: lectures, providing readings, videos, and then of course with like the Learn and Burns, we do demonstrations. And all of this is really important for that engagement piece. It helps them gain that vision, the scope, motivation, all of these things. And then when we train people to do things, we're actually having them come out, like at the bottom, practice doing it and teaching others. I want to point out this yellow band called discussion. This is a critical point in learning where they're taking, they got all these inputs, this information, but now they need to process it. And so this is my last slide where I wanted to introduce to those that are interested in landowner education that we've developed an extension. Sandy Smith is one of our senior extension faculty, developed this methodology that helps provide opportunities for productive discussions around complex issues. So these are peer-led group discussions on previously identified topics. We have a methodology for organizing them, and the professionals are there just to provide clarifications and advice. And so the benefits of this approach is that adults really enjoy it. They love getting together and talking about what they know, asking questions. It provides clarification. It can help highlight misunderstandings. It helps foster trust, not only with their peers, but with professionals, because providing opportunities to listen and feel like the being heard is really important for building trust. It can bring communities together on issues, and it can increase the impact of educational programming, because now educators are standing there listening to their clients and going, okay, now I know where you're coming from and why you're thinking in this particular way. So this is an excellent method for filling in that really important part of facilitating discussion around complex issues. And the best part is this method can be conducted by anyone. And so I'm going to leave it open to feel free to contact me if this is something you want to maybe bring to your county, your area, this Peers and Pros method to talk about private lands burning. And I'm happy to take any questions.